The blizzard hit Wyoming territory with a fury that caught even the seasoned ranchers off guard. And Olivia Foster found herself clinging to consciousness in a snowdrift 3 miles from anywhere that mattered. She had been traveling from Cheyenne to White River with a small wagon train when the storm descended like a white curtain, separating her wagon from the others in a matter of minutes. Her horse had panicked, bolted, and overturned the wagon in a shallow ravine. Now she lay half buried in snow, her left ankle screaming with pain, her fingers growing numb despite her gloves. The winter of 1885 was proving to be one of the harshest on record, and Olivia realized with growing dread that she might not live to see the spring. The cold was seeping into her bones, making her thoughts sluggish. She tried to move again, but the pain in her ankle sent white-hot agony shooting up her leg. The wagon lay on its side a few feet away, its contents scattered across the snow. She could see her trunk, the one containing all her worldly possessions, wedged under the broken wheel. Everything she owned, everything she had brought west after her father's death back in Philadelphia, was now at the mercy of this merciless storm. She closed her eyes, fighting the urge to simply let the snow cover her completely. It would be so easy to just drift off to sleep, to let the cold take her. But something in her refused to surrender, some stubborn spark that her father had instilled in her during their 22 years together. He had always told her she was stronger than she knew, braver than she believed. Through the howling wind, she heard something that made her eyes snap open. Hoofbeats. Slow, steady hoofbeats crunching through the snow. She tried to call out, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. She tried again, forcing every ounce of strength she had left into her throat. "Help! Please help!" The hoofbeats stopped. For a terrifying moment, she thought she had imagined them, that her mind was playing cruel tricks as hypothermia set in. Then a figure appeared through the swirling snow, leading a large bay horse. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy sheepskin coat and a hat pulled low against the wind. A thick scarf covered the lower half of his face, but she could see his eyes, dark and concerned, as they fell upon her. "Jesus," he breathed, dropping to his knees beside her. His voice was deep, warm despite the cold. "Madam, can you hear me? Can you move?" "My ankle," she managed through chattering teeth. "It's trapped. I think it's broken." Without hesitation, the stranger began digging through the snow around her legs with gloved hands. He worked quickly but carefully, and when he reached her trapped ankle, he paused to assess the situation. A piece of the wagon's running board had fallen across it, pinning it in place. "This is going to hurt," he warned, his eyes meeting hers. Even through her pain and fear, Olivia noticed they were a warm brown, the color of coffee with just a touch of cream. "But I need to lift this board." "Can you pull your leg free when I do?" She nodded, bracing herself. He counted to 3, then lifted. The pain was excruciating, but Olivia bit down on her lip and pulled her leg free. The stranger immediately lowered the board and returned his attention to her, his hands gentle as they examined her ankle through her boot. "Definitely injured, might be broken. We need to get you somewhere warm and fast. My ranch is about a mile north of here. Can you ride?" "I don't think I can even stand," Olivia admitted, hating the weakness in her voice. "That's all right. I'll get you there." He stood and went to his horse, returning with a thick wool blanket. He wrapped it around her shoulders, then without asking permission, he scooped her up in his arms as though she weighed nothing at all. She gasped at the sudden movement, but he held her securely against his chest. "What about my things?" she asked, looking back at the overturned wagon. "I'll send some of my men back for them once the storm passes. Right now, you're what matters." He lifted her onto his horse, then swung up behind her, keeping one arm firmly around her waist to hold her in place. She leaned back against him, too exhausted and cold to worry about propriety. His body was solid and warm, and even through their layers of clothing, she could feel the heat radiating from him. They rode through the blizzard in silence, the stranger guiding his horse with expert precision through the whiteout conditions. Olivia drifted in and out of awareness, her head lolling against his shoulder. She felt his arm tighten around her each time she started to slip, heard him murmur words of encouragement that were snatched away by the wind. When they finally reached the ranch, Olivia was barely conscious. She had a vague impression of buildings materializing out of the snow, of warm yellow light spilling from windows, of the stranger calling out orders to someone. Then she was being carried again, this time into blessed warmth that made her skin prickle and burn as sensation began returning to her extremities. "Get Doc Miller out here as soon as the weather allows," the stranger was saying to someone. "And heat some water, lots of it. We need to get her warmed up slowly." Olivia was placed on something soft, a bed or a couch, and then the stranger was kneeling beside her, carefully removing her wet gloves. His own gloves were off now, and she could see his hands were large, work-roughened, but surprisingly gentle as they chafed her frozen fingers. "Stay with me now," he said, his voice cutting through the fog in her mind. "What's your name, Olivia?" she whispered. "Olivia Foster. Olivia." "That's a pretty name. I'm Ethan Xavier. This is my ranch, the Double X. You're safe now." For the first time since the storm had separated her from the wagon train, Olivia felt the tight knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. She looked up at Ethan Xavier, really looked at him now that they were inside and he had removed his hat and scarf. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends and strong, even features. His face was weathered from years of outdoor work, with small lines at the corners of his eyes, but there was a kindness in those eyes that made her trust him instinctively. "Thank you," she managed. "You saved my life. Just happened to be out checking on the cattle when the storm hit. Saw your wagon go over. Lucky I was nearby." An older woman bustled into the room, carrying an armload of blankets and towels. She was short and round, with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun and sharp blue eyes that took in the situation immediately. "Lord have mercy, Ethan, where did you find this poor girl?" "About 3 miles south, Mrs. Patterson. Her wagon overturned in the storm. She needs warming up and her ankle looked at." Mrs. Patterson set down her load and came to Olivia's side, her expression shifting from concern to gentle efficiency. "All right then, let's get these wet clothes off her before she catches her death. Ethan, you go on now. This isn't work for you." Ethan stood but hesitated at the doorway. "Send for me if she needs anything, and let me know when Doc Miller arrives." After he left, Mrs. Patterson helped Olivia out of her wet, frozen clothing and into a warm flannel nightgown that smelled of lavender and sunshine. The older woman's hands were brisk, but kind as she toweled Olivia's long auburn hair dry and wrapped her in heated blankets. "That's better," Mrs. Patterson declared, studying Olivia's face. "You've got some color coming back to your cheeks. Now let's take a look at that ankle." When Mrs. Patterson carefully removed Olivia's boot and stocking, they both winced. The ankle was swollen to twice its normal size and already turning purple. "That's a bad sprain at the very least," Mrs. Patterson said grimly, "but we'll wait for Doc Miller to say for sure. In the meantime, let's get some hot broth into you." Over the next hour, as Olivia slowly warmed up and sipped at the beef broth Mrs. Patterson brought her, she learned that the older woman was Ethan Xavier's housekeeper, and had been since his parents died 5 years ago. The Double X Ranch was one of the largest in the area, running several hundred head of cattle and a dozen horses. Ethan ran it himself with the help of half a dozen ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse. "He's a good man, Mr. Xavier," Mrs. Patterson said as she fussed with the blankets. "Works harder than any two men I know and treats his employees fair. Never married, though. Too busy with the ranch, I suppose, and too particular about who he'd want to spend his life with." Olivia didn't know what to say to that, so she simply nodded and took another sip of broth. The doctor arrived late in the afternoon, after the worst of the storm had passed. He was an older gentleman with spectacles and gentle hands, and after examining Olivia's ankle, he declared it badly sprained but not broken. "You'll need to stay off it for at least 2 weeks," he told her firmly. "After that, you can start putting a little weight on it, but carefully. Full healing will take 6 to 8 weeks. You're lucky, Miss Foster. It could have been much worse." "Where am I supposed to stay for 2 weeks?" Olivia asked, the reality of her situation suddenly hitting her. "I was traveling to White River to take a position as a school teacher. They'll be expecting me." "I'll send word to White River," Ethan said from the doorway. Olivia hadn't noticed him come in, but he was leaning against the frame, his arms crossed over his chest. "Let them know you'll be delayed due to injury. In the meantime, you'll stay here. We have plenty of room and Mrs. Patterson can look after you." "I couldn't possibly impose," Olivia protested, even as relief flooded through her. The thought of trying to travel anywhere right now, injured and alone, had been overwhelming. "It's not an imposition," Ethan said firmly. "You're injured and it's partly my fault for not spotting your wagon sooner. The least I can do is provide you a place to recover." "Your fault?" Olivia stared at him in disbelief. "You saved my life. Could have saved you sooner if I'd been paying better attention." His tone brooked no argument. "You'll stay here until you're well enough to travel. That's the end of it." Over the following days, Olivia found herself settling into an unexpected routine at the Double X Ranch. She spent most of her time in the guest room, her ankle propped on pillows, reading books from Ethan's surprisingly extensive library. Mrs. Patterson brought her meals on trays and sat to chat while Olivia ate, filling her in on ranch gossip and the history of the area. Ethan himself stopped by several times a day, always with some excuse. He needed to check on her ankle, or he thought she might like the book he was returning to the shelf, or he wanted to make sure Mrs. Patterson wasn't talking her ear off. Each visit was brief, but Olivia found herself looking forward to them with an anticipation that surprised her. On the third day, he brought her a wooden crutch that he had fashioned himself. "Figured you might be going stir-crazy in here," he said, holding it out to her. "This should help you get around a bit as long as you're careful." Olivia took the crutch, running her fingers over the smooth wood. It had been carefully sanded and perfectly sized for her height. "You made this?" "For me. Wasn't any trouble. Had some spare wood in the barn." But there was a faint flush on his cheeks that suggested he had put more effort into it than he was admitting. With Ethan's help and the crutch's support, Olivia managed to make it to the main living area. The house was larger than she had realized, with high ceilings and large windows that let in plenty of light. The furniture was solid and practical, but there were touches of refinement that spoke of the family who had built this place: framed photographs on the mantel, a piano in the corner, lace curtains at the windows. "Your mother's?" Olivia asked, nodding toward the piano. "She loved music. Played every evening after supper." Ethan's voice was soft with memory. "Haven't heard it played since she passed." "Do you play?" "No, always meant to learn, but ranch work kept me busy." He looked at the piano with something like regret. "Do you, some?" "My father insisted I learn, said music was food for the soul." "Maybe when your ankle is better, you could play something. Would be nice to hear music in this house again." It was such a simple request, but something about the way he said it, The hint of loneliness beneath the words made Olivia's heart ache. As the days passed and turned into a week, Olivia grew stronger and more mobile. She began helping Mrs. Patterson with small tasks, peeling vegetables for supper while sitting at the kitchen table, folding laundry, mending torn shirts. It felt good to be useful, to contribute in some small way to the household that had taken her in. She also spent more time with Ethan. He would come in from working on the ranch and find her in the living room, and they would talk while he warmed himself by the fire. She learned that he had inherited the ranch at 21, when his parents were killed in a stagecoach accident. He had been studying law back east but had returned immediately to run the family business. Never regretted it, he told her one evening as they sat watching the sunset through the front windows. This land, this life, it's in my blood. Couldn't imagine doing anything else. You gave up a lot, though, Olivia said softly. A career, a different life. Gave up some things, gained others. Out here, a man's word is his bond and hard work pays off. There's a honesty to ranch life that I appreciate. He turned to look at her, his eyes serious. What about you? What brought you west? Olivia wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders. My father died 6 months ago. He was a banker in Philadelphia, very successful. I thought I'd have time to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, but it turned out his business partner had been embezzling funds for years. Everything was gone. The house, the money, all of it. I'm sorry. A friend of my father's had connections out here. Knew White River needed a schoolteacher. It seemed like a chance to start over, to make something of myself on my own terms. She smiled ruefully, though I didn't plan on nearly freezing to death on the way. Fate works in mysterious ways, Ethan said quietly. Their eyes met and held for a long moment. Olivia felt something shift between them, something warm and electric that made her breath catch. Ethan seemed to feel it too, because he cleared his throat and stood abruptly. I should check on the horses, make sure they're settled for the night. After he left, Olivia sat in the gathering darkness, her heart beating faster than it should. She barely knew this man, had been in his house for only a week, yet she found herself thinking about him constantly. The way he moved, economical and sure. The way his face softened when he talked about his parents or the ranch. The way he looked at her sometimes, as though she were something precious and unexpected. She told herself it was simply gratitude, that anyone would develop feelings for the person who had saved their life. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Ethan Xavier had shown her a kindness that went beyond duty, had treated her not as an obligation but as a guest, almost as family. In his presence, she felt valued and protected in a way she never had before. The second week brought a thaw, the snow melting into muddy streams that ran through the ranch yard. Olivia's ankle was healing well, and she could now walk short distances without the crutch, though it still ached if she was on it too long. One morning, Ethan came in looking troubled. Got word from White River, he said, handing Olivia a letter. The school board has hired someone else. Said they couldn't wait any longer. Olivia read the letter, her heart sinking. She had expected this, had known it was a possibility, but seeing it in writing made it real. She had no job, no prospects, and very little money. What will you do? Ethan asked gently. I don't know. Olivia folded the letter carefully, fighting back tears of frustration. I suppose I could try to find another position, but teaching jobs are scarce, especially this time of year. You could stay here. Olivia looked up sharply. What? Ethan shifted his weight, suddenly looking uncomfortable. I mean, Mrs. Patterson has been saying she could use help around the house. The ranch is growing and she's not getting any younger. If you wanted to stay on as a sort of assistant housekeeper, there would be room and board plus a small salary. It wasn't the teaching position she had dreamed of, but it was something. More than something, it was a lifeline. And if she was honest with herself, the idea of leaving the double X of leaving Ethan had been weighing on her more than the loss of the teaching job. Are you sure? I wouldn't want to be a burden. You wouldn't be. You've been helping out this past week anyway. Might as well make it official. He met her eyes. Besides, I'd like you to stay. The simple honesty in his words made Olivia's decision easy. Then I'll stay. Thank you, Ethan, for everything. His face broke into a smile, the first genuine, unguarded smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his features from merely handsome to something that made her heart skip beats. Good. That's real good. As assistant housekeeper, Olivia found her days fuller and more satisfying than they had ever been back in Philadelphia. She helped Mrs. Patterson with the cooking and cleaning, tended the kitchen garden as the weather warmed, and even learned to make butter and cheese. The work was hard and her hands grew rough, but there was a satisfaction in it that she had never found in embroidery or calling cards. She also saw more of Ethan. He took his meals with her and Mrs. Patterson now, instead of eating alone in his study, as he apparently had before. They talked about everything and nothing, books and politics, ranch life and city life, their dreams and disappointments. Olivia learned that he was funny in a dry, understated way, that he read voraciously despite his busy schedule, and that he had a deep well of compassion for people and animals alike. One evening in early spring, as they sat on the front porch watching the stars come out, Ethan reached over and took her hand. It was the first time he had touched her beyond helping her walk or handing her something, and the contact sent warmth spreading through her. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low and serious. Olivia's heart began to pound. "What is it? These past 2 months, having you here, it's changed things for me, changed me." He turned to face her, still holding her hand. "I never thought much about getting married, about having a family. The ranch kept me busy enough, and I figured I was content with that. But then you came into my life, and suddenly this place feels different. Feels like it could be a home instead of just a ranch." "Ethan," Olivia whispered, barely able to breathe. "I know it might seem too soon. I know you came here because you had nowhere else to go, and I don't want you to feel obligated or pressured, but I need you to know how I feel." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I'm falling in love with you, Olivia Foster. Might have started falling that first day when you were so determined to live, when you refused to give up despite everything. And every day since, it's just gotten stronger." Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks, but they were happy tears. "I'm falling in love with you too. I have been for weeks now. I kept telling myself it was just gratitude, that I was confused because you saved me, but it's so much more than that." Ethan's face lit up with such joy that it took her breath away. He reached up with his free hand and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. "Don't cry, darling. Please don't cry. They're happy tears," she assured him, laughing through them. "I just never thought I'd find this. Love, real love. After losing my father and everything I knew, I thought maybe I wasn't meant for happiness." "You're meant for all the happiness in the world," Ethan said fiercely. "And if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Olivia met him halfway. Their lips touched softly at first, tentative and sweet, then with growing confidence and passion. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, and Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he breathed. "I know it's fast, I know we should wait longer, be more sensible, but life is short and uncertain, and I don't want to waste a single day not being with you completely." "Yes," Olivia said without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." They sat on that porch for hours, talking about their future, making plans, stealing kisses that grew longer and deeper as the night progressed. When Mrs. Patterson found them the next morning, still sitting there with Olivia curled against Ethan's chest, she just smiled knowingly and went to start breakfast. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, on a beautiful May morning with the mountains sharp and clear in the distance. It was a simple affair held at the small church in White River, with Mrs. Patterson and the ranch hands in attendance, along with several of Ethan's friends and business associates. Olivia wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Mrs. Patterson had helped her sew, with wildflowers in her hair that Ethan had picked himself that morning. As she walked down the aisle toward where Ethan stood waiting, his face full of love and wonder, Olivia felt the last pieces of her old life fall away. She was no longer the sheltered banker's daughter from Philadelphia, no longer the woman who had nearly died in a snowstorm. She was simply Olivia, about to marry the man who had shown her what true love and partnership looked like. The Reverend's words washed over her like a benediction, but the only ones that truly mattered were Ethan's vows, spoken in his deep, steady voice. "I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I promise to stand beside you through whatever storms may come, to be your shelter and your strength. You made me believe in love again, Olivia. You made me believe in the possibility of happiness. I will spend every day trying to do the same for you." Olivia spoke her own vows through tears, promising to love him with everything she had, to build a life and a home with him, to face whatever challenges came their way together. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife and Ethan kissed her, the small congregation erupted in applause and cheers. But Olivia barely heard them. All she could focus on was the man holding her, the man who had saved her life and then taught her how to truly live it. The celebration back at the ranch was lively, with music and dancing and enough food to feed twice the number of guests. Olivia danced until her feet hurt, laughing as Ethan spun her around the makeshift dance floor they had set up in the barn. She danced with the ranch hands too, with Doc Miller who had come out for the occasion, even with Mrs. Patterson who had tears streaming down her face the entire time. As the sun began to set and the guests started to head home, Ethan took Olivia's hand and led her away from the party, up to the house and to the master bedroom that was now theirs. "Mrs. Xavier," he said softly, closing the door behind them. "I like the sound of that." "So do I," Olivia said, reaching up to cup his face. "I love you, Ethan, so much it sometimes scares me. Don't be scared, I've got you, always." He kissed her tenderly, then with growing intensity as she responded, "Let me show you how much I love you." Their wedding night was everything Olivia had dreamed of and more. Ethan was patient and gentle, taking his time to learn what pleased her, worshiping her body with hands and lips until she was trembling with need. When they finally came together, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, like they had been made to fit together just so. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the sheets, Ethan held her close and murmured endearments into her hair. "I never want to let you go," he said. "Never want this feeling to end." "It won't," Olivia promised. "We have the rest of our lives." The weeks and months that followed were some of the happiest of Olivia's life. She threw herself into being a ranch wife, learning everything she could about the operation. She kept the books, managing the accounts with the skills her father had taught her. She helped during branding season, cooking for the extra hands they hired on. She learned to ride properly, joining Ethan on his rounds of the property, falling in love all over again as he showed her every corner of the land he loved. But it was the quiet moments she treasured most. Evenings spent reading together by the fire, Ethan's head in her lap as she ran her fingers through his hair. Early mornings when he would wake her with kisses before heading out to work. The way he always found an excuse to touch her in passing, a hand on her waist, a brush of his fingers against hers. The look in his eyes when he came in at the end of a long day and saw her waiting for him. They had their challenges, of course. The ranch work was demanding and often dangerous. There was a terrifying week in July when Ethan was thrown from a horse and broke 2 ribs. Olivia nursed him back to health, scolding him for trying to get back to work too soon, holding him carefully at night so as not to hurt his injuries. "You're too stubborn for your own good," she told him as she helped him back to bed after catching him trying to saddle his horse. "Look who's talking," he retorted, but he let her help him, let her care for him in a way that she suspected he had never allowed anyone else to do. There was also the hard winter that followed, not as severe as the one that had brought them together but difficult enough. Several head of cattle were lost, and money grew tight, but they weathered it together, cutting back where they could, working harder than ever. "We'll get through this," Ethan told her one night as they reviewed the accounts, the numbers looking grimmer than either of them liked. "I know we will," Olivia said firmly, "because we have each other." And they did get through it. When spring came and the calves were born and the herd grew strong again, the ranch began to prosper once more. Ethan was able to hire another hand, take on more cattle, even buy the adjacent property when it came up for sale. In the fall of 1887, nearly 2 years after that fateful blizzard, Olivia realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had wanted to be sure before telling Ethan. When Doc Miller confirmed it, she practically ran home to find her husband. He was in the barn, checking on a mare that was due to foal soon. She called his name and he turned, his face breaking into a smile that quickly shifted to concern when he saw her expression. "What's wrong? Are you all right?" "I'm more than all right." She crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. "Ethan, we're going to have a baby." For a moment, he just stared at her as if he couldn't quite process the words. Then his face transformed with such pure joy that it brought tears to Olivia's eyes. "A baby." He pulled her close, careful not to squeeze too hard. "We're really going to have a baby." "Yes. Doc Miller says probably late spring." Ethan kissed her with such tenderness that Olivia felt her heart might burst. When he pulled back, there were tears on his cheeks. "You've given me so much," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "More than I ever dreamed of having, and now this. A child, our child. Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to cover it. I'm blessed, we're blessed." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Olivia found herself exhausted much of the time. Ethan hovered over her constantly, trying to keep her from doing too much, insisting she rest. Mrs. Patterson was just as bad, constantly bringing her food and drinks, making sure she was comfortable. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," Olivia protested one day when Ethan tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "I know that. I just want to make sure you and the baby are safe and healthy." "We will be. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. But you're not just any woman. You're my woman carrying my child. Let me take care of you." How could she argue with that? So she let him fuss, let him and Mrs. Patterson pamper her because she knew it came from love. As her belly grew and winter gave way to spring, Olivia found herself making preparations. She sewed tiny gowns and knitted small blankets. Ethan built a beautiful cradle from oak, spending hours in the barn getting every detail perfect. They turned one of the spare bedrooms into a nursery, painting it a soft yellow and hanging curtains with tiny flowers embroidered on them. "What do you hope for?" Olivia asked Ethan one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her swollen stomach. "A boy or a girl, doesn't matter to me, as long as the baby is healthy and you're all right." He felt the baby kick against his palm and laughed in wonder. "Did you feel that?" "I feel it all the time. Your son or daughter is very active. Takes after their mother then." The baby came on a warm May evening, 3 days past when Doc Miller had predicted. Olivia's labor started just after supper, gentle at first but growing steadily stronger. Ethan sent one of the hands racing for the doctor and stayed by Olivia's side, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. "You're doing so well," he told her during a contraction, his own face pale with worry. "You're so strong, so brave." "Tell me that when this is over," Olivia panted. The labor lasted through the night and into the early morning. Doc Miller arrived and took charge, with Mrs. Patterson assisting. Ethan refused to leave, despite the doctor's suggestion that he might want to wait elsewhere. "I'm staying with my wife," he said firmly, and that was the end of that discussion. When the baby finally came, slipping into the world with a lusty cry just as the sun was rising, Ethan was the first to see. "It's a boy," he said, his voice full of awe. "Olivia, we have a son." Doc Miller cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket, then handed him to Olivia. She looked down at the tiny face, the dark eyes that blinked up at her, the small fist that waved in the air, and felt her heart expand in a way she hadn't known was possible. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Ethan leaned over them both, one arm around Olivia, one finger gently touching the baby's hand. The tiny fingers immediately curled around it, holding on tight. "He's perfect," Ethan breathed. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Edward Thomas Xavier, after both his grandfathers. He was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. Watching Ethan with their son melted Olivia's heart. The big, tough rancher turned into a gentle giant around the baby, handling him with such care and wonder, talking to him in a soft voice, walking him around the ranch to show him everything. "He's too young to understand any of this," Olivia said with amusement one afternoon when she found Ethan in the barn, holding the baby and explaining the different horses to him. "It's never too early to start learning," Ethan said seriously, though his eyes were dancing. "He needs to know about his heritage, about this land." As Edward grew, Olivia and Ethan settled into their new roles as parents. It was exhausting and challenging, but also incredibly rewarding. There were sleepless nights and teething troubles, but there were also first smiles and first laughs, tiny hands reaching for them, the weight of their son falling asleep on their chests. Through it all, Ethan continued to treat Olivia like she was the most precious thing in the world. He brought her wildflowers, took over with the baby when she was exhausted, made sure she took time for herself. On their third wedding anniversary, he surprised her with a beautiful necklace, a delicate gold chain with a small pendant shaped like a heart. "I saw it in Cheyenne and thought of you," he said as he fastened it around her neck. "Though it's not nearly as beautiful as the woman wearing it." "You spoil me," Olivia said, turning to kiss him. "Not nearly enough. You gave me everything, Olivia. Love, a family, a real home." "The least I can do is give you flowers and jewelry." "The least you do is love me," Olivia corrected. "And that's all I need." Edward was 2 years old when Olivia became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was harder, with more nausea and fatigue. Ethan worried constantly, but Olivia assured him she was fine. "Just different from the first time," she told him. "Every pregnancy is different." Their daughter was born in the autumn of 1890. A tiny, delicate thing with auburn hair like her mother's and blue eyes that would later turn to match her father's brown. They named her Charlotte Ann, and she had her father wrapped around her little finger from the moment she drew breath. "I'm in trouble now," Ethan said, holding his daughter for the first time while Edward climbed onto the bed to see his new sister. "A daughter? How am I supposed to say no to this face?" "You'll manage," Olivia said with a laugh. "Though I suspect she'll have you doing her bidding before she can even walk." She was right. As Charlotte grew, she proved to be a perfect mix of sweet and stubborn, able to charm her father into anything with a smile, but also possessing an iron will that rivaled his own. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. The ranch continued to prosper, growing into one of the most successful operations in Wyoming territory. Edward grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Charlotte was bright and curious, always asking questions, always wanting to know how things worked and why. Olivia sometimes thought back to that blizzard in 1885, to the frightened woman nearly frozen in a snowdrift, and marveled at how much her life had changed. She had come west seeking a new start, a way to support herself. Instead, she had found love, family, and a place where she truly belonged. On a crisp autumn evening in 1895, as they celebrated their 8th wedding anniversary, Ethan pulled her away from the dinner table where their children were eating and out onto the porch where they had first confessed their love. "Remember this spot?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "How could I forget? This is where you told me you were falling in love with me. Best decision I ever made, telling you that. Scared to death you'd reject me, but I couldn't keep it in any longer." Olivia turned in his arms to face him. "I was so relieved when you said it. I'd been in love with you for weeks and thought I was going crazy. 10 years ago, almost to the day, I pulled a half-frozen woman out of a snowdrift." Ethan cupped her face in his hands. "I thought I was just saving someone's life. Didn't know I was finding mine. The winter made me dependent on you," Olivia said softly, echoing thoughts she had had many times over the years. "But your kindness, your gentleness, that's what made me fall in love with you. You made me feel like a queen, Ethan. You still do every single day." "You are my queen, you're everything." He kissed her tenderly. "Here's to 10 more years, 10 times 10 more years." "Forever," Olivia agreed. "I love you, Ethan Xavier." "I love you too, Olivia Xavier. More than words can say." They stood there wrapped in each other's arms as the sun set over the mountains, the sounds of their children's laughter drifting out from the house. Inside was warmth and light and love, a home they had built together from nothing but hope and hard work and devotion to each other. The years continued to unfold with their share of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. When Wyoming achieved statehood in 1890, Ethan was asked to run for the state legislature, but he declined, preferring to focus on his family and ranch. Edward started school in White River, making the ride each day on his pony, while Charlotte proved too spirited to be left behind and convinced her parents to let her start early. In 1896, Mrs. Patterson passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 73. Ethan and Olivia mourned her deeply, this woman who had been so much more than a housekeeper. They buried her in the small cemetery near White River, with a headstone that read, "Beloved friend and family." Olivia took over all the household duties after that, with help from a young woman named Sarah who came out from town 3 days a week. It was more work than she had handled in years, but she found she didn't mind. This was her home, her family, and caring for them brought her joy. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Ethan bought more land, increased the herd, and began breeding horses as well as cattle. He had a gift for it, an eye for good bloodlines and the patience to train difficult animals. Edward worked alongside his father as soon as he was old enough, learning everything he could about ranching. Charlotte surprised everyone by showing an aptitude for numbers and began helping her mother with the accounts when she was only 10 years old. In the summer of 1898, tragedy struck when a summer fever swept through White River. Charlotte fell ill, burning with fever and coughing so hard she could barely breathe. For 3 terrifying days, Olivia and Ethan took turns sitting by her bedside, bathing her with cool water, trying to get her to drink. Doc Miller came out twice a day, but there was little he could do except wait and hope. "Please," Olivia prayed on the 3rd night, holding her daughter's small hand. "Please don't take her from us." Ethan sat on the other side of the bed, his face haggard with exhaustion and fear. "She's strong. She'll fight through this." And she did. On the 4th morning, Charlotte's fever broke, and though she was weak and thin, the light came back into her eyes. The relief Olivia and Ethan felt was almost physical, like being able to breathe again after nearly drowning. "Don't ever scare us like that again," Ethan told his daughter, his voice rough as he held her carefully. "I'll try not to, Papa," Charlotte whispered. After Charlotte recovered, life seemed even more precious. Ethan made a point of spending more time with the children, teaching Edward advanced ranching techniques, taking Charlotte riding even though ranch work called. Olivia watched her family with a heart full of gratitude, knowing how close they had come to losing their daughter. Edward turned 16 in 1899 and declared his intention to run the ranch with his father rather than pursue further education. Ethan was pleased but also concerned. "You're sure this is what you want?" he asked his son. "You're smart enough to be anything you want to be. A lawyer, a doctor, whatever you choose." "I choose this," Edward said firmly. "The ranch, the land, this life. It's in my blood just like it's in yours." How could Ethan argue with that? So Edward became his full partner in running the XX, taking on more and more responsibility as the years passed. Charlotte, meanwhile, shocked everyone by announcing at 14 that she wanted to be a teacher. Olivia was delighted, seeing something of her own younger self in her daughter's determination. "Then a teacher you'll be," Ethan said, though Olivia could see the effort it took him to imagine his little girl growing up and leaving the ranch. Charlotte attended the school in White River, then went on to a normal school in Cheyenne. She came home every chance she got, filling the house with her energy and stories. When she graduated at 18 and got a position at a school in Laramie, Olivia cried at seeing her daughter leave, but she was also immensely proud. The turn of the century found Ethan and Olivia in their early 40s, looking back on 15 years of marriage with satisfaction and looking forward to whatever years lay ahead. Edward was now essentially running the ranch, with Ethan in more of an advisory role. Charlotte was thriving as a teacher, writing long letters home about her students and her life in Laramie. "We did well," Ethan said one evening as they sat on the porch, the same porch where so much of their story had unfolded. "Raised good kids, built a good life." "We did," Olivia agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder, "though I think the story is far from over." She was right. In 1902, Edward married a sweet-natured girl named Mary from White River, and they built a house on the northern edge of the ranch property. A year later, they gave Ethan and Olivia their first grandchild, a boy they named Samuel. Ethan was besotted with the baby, just as he had been with his own children, and Olivia delighted in being a grandmother. Charlotte met a young lawyer in Laramie and married him in 1904. They moved to Cheyenne, where he practiced law and she taught at the local school. They visited the ranch several times a year, and in 1906, they added their own son to the growing Xavier family. Through all the changes, all the years, Ethan and Olivia's love remained the constant at the center of everything. They still held hands while walking around the ranch, still stole kisses when they thought no one was looking, still talked late into the night about everything and nothing. On their 20th anniversary in 1903, Ethan took Olivia back to the spot where he had found her in the blizzard. It took some effort to locate it after so many years, but he remembered the landmarks, the way the land dipped into that particular ravine. "This is where it all started," he said, helping her down from her horse. "Right here you changed my life." "You changed mine," Olivia corrected. "I was lost in more ways than one that day. You found me, saved me, and then you loved me. How can I ever thank you for that?" "You thank me every day just by being you, by loving me back, by building this life with me." He pulled her close. "I was half alive before you, Olivia, going through the motions but never really living. You taught me how to truly live." "We taught each other," Olivia said. "We saved each other." They stood there in the late afternoon sun, remembering that desperate, cold day 20 years ago, marveling at all that had come from it. The years continued to pass, bringing more grandchildren, more changes to the ranch and the family. Wyoming continued to grow and develop, becoming more civilized with each passing year. The rough edges of the frontier days smoothed out, though the essential character of the land and the people remained. Ethan and Olivia grew older together, their hair turning gray, their steps slowing. But the love between them never diminished. If anything, it deepened, seasoned by years of partnership and weathering storms together. In the spring of 1925, 40 years after that fateful blizzard, Ethan and Olivia celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a huge party, 3 generations of Xaviers filling the house and yard. Edward and Mary had 5 children now, all involved in the ranch in various ways. Charlotte and her husband had 4 children, with the oldest already graduated from law school and practicing in Denver. As Olivia looked around at the celebration, at all these people who existed because Ethan had happened to be checking his cattle during a blizzard 40 years ago, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude and love. Ethan found her standing alone for a moment, watching the festivities, and wrapped his arms around her from behind just as he had done so many times over the years. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "Everything. Nothing. Just how blessed we are, how lucky I am. I'm the lucky one. I got to spend 40 years with the woman I love, got to build a life and a family with her, got to wake up next to her every morning and fall asleep with her every night." He turned her in his arms. "You're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, Olivia Xavier." "Now I know you're going blind in your old age," Olivia said with a laugh, but she blushed with pleasure. "My eyes work just fine. And what I see is the woman who has been my partner, my best friend, my lover, and my everything for 40 years. That kind of beauty doesn't fade." They kissed there in front of everyone, to cheers and applause from their children and grandchildren. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. 40 more years," Ethan said. "We'll be ancient," Olivia pointed out. "Don't care. One every year I can get with you." "Then 40 more years it is," Olivia agreed. "Though let's make them good ones. With you, they're all good ones." As the sun set on their anniversary celebration, as the family gathered around them full of love and laughter, Ethan and Olivia stood together, hands linked as they had been for 40 years. They had weathered blizzards and droughts, sickness and health, joy and sorrow. Through it all, their love had been the foundation upon which everything else was built. The winter that had made Olivia dependent on a kind stranger had given her so much more than just survival. It had given her a home, a family, and a love that had sustained her through 4 decades and would continue to do so for whatever time they had left. Ethan had been gentle and kind from the very beginning, treating her with a respect and care that had made her feel valued in a way she never had before. He had made her feel like a queen, not through grand gestures or expensive gifts, but through the steady, unwavering devotion of his presence, the security of his love, and the partnership they had built together. As the stars came out over the Wyoming sky, Ethan and Olivia sat on their porch one last time that night, wrapped in blankets against the cool spring air, surrounded by the life they had built together. "No regrets?" Ethan asked softly. "Not a single one," Olivia said firmly. "You. Just that I didn't find you sooner. We found each other exactly when we were supposed to. Everything happened exactly as it was meant to." Ethan pulled her closer, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the night sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. From the barn came the gentle sounds of horses settling in for the night. Inside the house, their children and grandchildren were still visiting, the sound of their voices a pleasant murmur. This was home. This was love. This was the life that had grown from a chance meeting during a blizzard, from one man's kindness and one woman's courage. As they finally rose to go inside to join their family for one more hour before everyone departed, Ethan took Olivia's hand and brought it to his lips, just as he had done that night 40 years ago when he first told her he was falling in love with her. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For saying yes, for staying, for loving me, for giving me the best 40 years a man could ask for. The pleasure has been all mine," Olivia said, standing on her toes to kiss him. "You saved my life that winter day, but you've been saving it every day since. You gave me everything I didn't even know I wanted. You made me happier than I ever dreamed possible." They went inside together, back to their family, back to the warmth and light and love that filled every corner of the house. Outside, the Wyoming night settled over the ranch, peaceful and quiet, the stars shining down on the land that had witnessed the unfolding of a great love story. Years later, when their great-grandchildren asked about how Olivia and Ethan had met, the story was told with reverence and wonder. The blizzard, the rescue, the falling in love. It became family legend, passed down through the generations, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead us to the best things. But for Ethan and Olivia, living it had been even better than any story could capture. The daily moments of connection, the small kindnesses, the steady building of a life together, these were the things that mattered most. The blizzard had brought them together, but it was love, real and deep and true, that had kept them together through 4 decades and counting. As they grew older still, moving into their 70s and beyond, that love remained. When Ethan's joints grew stiff with arthritis and he couldn't work the ranch as he once had, Olivia was there, helping him, supporting him, just as he had supported her so many years ago when her ankle was injured. When Olivia's eyesight began to fail and she could no longer read as she loved to do, Ethan read to her every evening, his voice as soothing now as it had been that first day when he had promised her she was safe. They celebrated their 50th anniversary in 1935, surrounded by an even larger family. Great-grandchildren now ran around the ranch that Edward's sons managed. Charlotte had retired from teaching and lived with her husband in Cheyenne, but they visited often. The celebration was quieter than the 40th had been, befitting their age and energy levels, but no less full of love. As Ethan and Olivia cut the cake, as they danced slowly to music from the radio, a relatively new addition to the ranch, everyone watching could see that the love between them burned as brightly as ever. In the quiet of their bedroom that night, Ethan held Olivia close. 50 years, he marveled. Half a century with you. Best 50 years of my life, Olivia said, though I'm sure the next 50 will be even better. Ethan laughed, the sound warm in the darkness. I like your optimism, but I think we should focus on enjoying whatever time we have left. However much or little it is, as long as I have you. It's enough." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms as they had done for 50 years, as they would continue to do for whatever years remained. Ethan passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1938 at the age of 79. Olivia woke to find him gone, his face peaceful, his hand still holding hers. Though her heart broke, though the grief threatened to overwhelm her, she took comfort in knowing he had lived a full, happy life, surrounded by love until the very end. The funeral was enormous, with people coming from all over Wyoming to pay their respects to a man who had been respected and loved by everyone who knew him. As Olivia stood by his grave, surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, she felt the weight of all those years of love, all those memories. She lived another 5 years after Ethan's death, cared for by her family, still sharp and engaged with the world despite her advanced age. She spoke often of Ethan, keeping his memory alive through stories and reminiscences. On what would have been their 60th anniversary, she visited his grave and told him about all that had happened in the family, about the new great-great-grandchildren, about the changes to the ranch. "I miss you every day," she said softly, her weathered hand touching the headstone. "But I'll see you soon, my love. Wait for me." Olivia Foster Xavier passed away peacefully in her sleep on a snowy December night in 1943 at the age of 80. Her family buried her next to Ethan, their headstones side by side with epitaphs that spoke of love and devotion. The ranch continued through the generations, passed from Edward to his sons to their children. But the story of how it all began, of the blizzard and the rescue and the love that grew from it, that story remained at the heart of the Xavier family identity. It was told and retold, a reminder that love can be found in the most unexpected places, that kindness can change lives, that the hardest moments can lead to the greatest blessings. The house where Ethan and Olivia had lived and loved for so many years still stood, lovingly maintained by each generation. The porch where they had first confessed their love was preserved, becoming a favorite spot for Xavier family members to propose to their own loves. The room where their children and grandchildren had been born was honored. The ranch itself stood as a testament to what they had built together. And on cold winter nights, when the wind howled across the Wyoming plains and snow fell thick and fast, the Xavier family members would gather around the fire and tell the story again. How a kind cowboy had found a freezing woman in a snowdrift. How he had saved her life and then stolen her heart. How she had made his house a home and his life complete. How the winter that could have killed her had instead given her everything worth living for. It was a story of rescue and redemption, of finding love when you least expected it, of two souls meant to be together finding their way to each other despite all odds. It was the story of Ethan and Olivia Xavier, and it would live on long after both of them were gone, a testament to the power of love and the beauty that can grow from a single act of kindness during the harshest of winters.